Hi, my name is Reed Silverne. The name of this show is Fed Pride. The reason it's called Fed Pride is because I'm a federal worker, retired, and proud of it. Today for me, it's the 17th of February, 2012. For you, it's probably a week later, probably the following Thursday, or 2 weeks later, or 3 weeks later, or almost a month later. So basically, I've been doing one show a month. Because I do one show a month, everything I say is so ridiculously obsolete that it's irrelevant. However, I've solved that problem in the past by talking about things so obscure that it can never be relevant in the first place, and therefore not relevant to you, my watcher and my viewer. However, we have an election season here. Last month, I talked about Romney and Bain Capital. I personally, and I've said this in the past, just don't like Mitt Romney. I don't like the way he looks at everybody. I don't like the way he acts. I don't like the way he comes across. He comes across as the boss that you can't stand to be around. You hope never comes down your row of cubes. And he is, and that's exactly what he was. And on top of that, he's also the financial manipulator. That was his private career and venture vulture capitalist who basically came out, borrowed money on the somebody else's assets, took over the company, burdened it with the debt, crushed it, tried to make it more efficient by cutting costs. Of course, the costs that needed to be cut because now the costs of the product were too high because Mitt Romney and his company burdened them with debt. Sometimes he went in on twice, made the company then dominated by his own handpicked board of directors buy back out the shares his company, Bain Capital, had in order to put more money into Bain Capital, his company. Meanwhile, that borrowed money was scooped up, kept as fees, and one way or the other, if the company survived, that's great, 2 or 3 did, but most of them were forced into bankruptcy and destroyed. Their employees were laid off. Their retirement funds were raided. There was a change in the law in the 80s that said that retirement funds, which should have been in escrow only for the people vested in the retirement fund, could be stolen, basically, legally seized by these vulture capitalists, these leveraged buyout kings. So that he left, some say in 1998, others say in 2003, when he became governor of Massachusetts, with tens and tens of millions of dollars, and basically an income stream of $20 million a year. So that's Romney. Now, I gave that right after the Florida primary. It looked like Romney, who has a whole group of hedge fund managers and fellow leveraged buyout kings and other finance chiefs, all giving millions of dollars in unregulated, uncontrolled money to his super PACs, and basically has many, almost an infinite amount of money to run on before he gets to his own $250 million, $250 million fortune, and has to dip into that. So Romney basically has an infinite supply of money. However, that didn't do him much good the following week. The previous week, it didn't do him good because he lost in the South Carolina primary to Newt Gingrich, of all people. The following week, he lost the Missouri primary to Rick Santorum, the social conservative. So the odd dynamic of the Republican primaries. And even before that, before the primaries started, the series of debates and so on and so forth, where every non-Romney conservative has a gigantic surge and then somehow self-destructs. It started with Bachmann, who won the Iowa straw poll. Then came Perry, who came in, embarrassed himself in some debates, all of whom replaced Romney as number one in a large field. Meanwhile, Romney's stuck with 25 to 30% of the Republican vote. The big money moderate and their supporters. I don't know why anybody would support him except for themselves, but they do. So this big money moderate group has supported Romney, 25 or 30%, and 25 and 30% of the Republicans only is not enough to get you even the nomination. After Perry, it was Herman Cain who came out of nowhere. Actually, it ended up that he had worked as a staffer for the Americans for Prosperity, which is one of the Koch brother front operations. And he went way up and he went way down. He had actually one good idea, which was to bring in a U.S. Sales tax and replace the corporate taxes, which aren't collecting any money anyway, with the sales tax, which seemed to me to be a pretty good idea, actually, because it forced the multinational importers of Chinese goods, of oil, and everything else to start paying some taxes. The largest importers, basically, and some of them pay negative tax. ExxonMobil, the largest, now the second largest company in valuation, but once the largest company, probably the largest company in the world in sales, paid no taxes, basically. They actually are given $2.6 billion a year net to themselves, and on top of paying no taxes on $40 billion a year in declared profits, and who knows how much else in surpluses and credit default swaps and gains of all kinds throughout the country. $40 billion in taxes, in profits that are declared. So, big banks, so on and so forth, GE and other companies basically pay no corporate tax at all. So that's basically what it was. Basically Romney, who was the front runner before this whole thing started, and the front runner at about 3 or 4 different times after Iowa, which he claimed that he won by 8 votes, but actually lost to Santorum, who didn't get his bump from that. Gingrich did. Then after wiping out Gingrich, he was the front runner again. And now Santorum is given his chance to have his big bump. And Santorum is a social conservative. He's the old-fashioned kind, the kind that believes the government should stay out of your business, but should be in your bedroom. And one good thing, and a couple good things about Santorum, especially after Romney. Now, my opinion of Mitt Romney is that he has absolutely no sense of right and wrong. He has a sense of illegal and legal, permitted and non-permitted, but he is willing to do anything, even if he rewrites the law to make it legal, in order to come out on top. He will take your house and throw you on the street and make you live under a bridge as long as what he's done is permitted. And he's said a bunch of things, even on the stump. I mean, the Bain things are old, but they're historic and they're documented. But he said things like, "I don't care about the poor," talking about Mitt Romney. Let the foreclosures go through their process, and then the housing crisis will solve itself. It was against the auto bailout just because it would have destroyed all manufacturing and the manufacturing base not only for GM and Chrysler, which were rescued, but would have destroyed all the suppliers to Ford, Toyota, Honda, Hyundai, and all the other car companies that have come to our shores that are dependent on tire makers, gear makers, and who knows, groups and gigantic companies of support to the auto industry. Basically, the auto industry, as was described to me when I was a government worker in a GM-owned plant, went through the, their orientation, I guess you might say. And this was in the 90s, that GM and all of its supply chain was an economy the size of France in the middle of the United States alone. So just gigantic, and no doubt about it, employed millions and millions of people, all of whom would have lost their jobs in this liquidity crisis, because what was going on with cars was not about bad management in the car industry. Not that there wasn't bad management in the car industry, but what was going on with cars is that just as mortgages had been taken over by derivatives, car loans, which were also title loans, were taken over by the derivative industry, sandwiched and consolidated into more basically title loan-backed securities, and those securities collapsed so that only people with cash in hand, basically, or sterling credit, was able to buy a car. Car sales dropped from an average of 16 to 17 million a year to 10 in months. And basically, the cash flow into the major car companies was not enough to support them. So that's what was really going on. And it took years to straighten out the financial mess, including a separate rescue of GMAC, which is GM's financing arm that gave out car loans, which was already going on and would have gone to waste if GM itself hadn't been rescued with some emergency loans. So Romney's against it. Santorum's against it too, but he's against anything like that. Now, the nice thing about Santorum, and the reason people respect him, especially Republicans, especially talk show Republicans, he has been absolutely consistent for years. He's not two-faced. He doesn't have the Romney coin, which is heads I win, tails you lose. Santorum has always believed the same thing. Unfortunately, some of the things that he believes is that contraception is evil, that sex before marriage needs to be discouraged, basically that the consequences of sex before marriage, which is unwanted pregnancy or STDs or whatever, are basically God's punishment on the wicked. So when you look at it that way, he's extremely consistent. The other good news is he's faithful to his wife. He does have a moral sense. He has a very, very strong value on what is right and what is wrong. He probably is not the kind of guy who would borrow money against his neighbor's house, throw his neighbor on the street, and then sell his neighbor's house at a profit that guaranteed a loss to the person that bought his neighbor's house. So he's not that type. He is a straight down the line person with straight down the line values. You may or may not agree with his values, and I don't agree with some of them, but you have to respect the fact that at least he has them. And that puts him way ahead of Gingrich, who knows the difference between right and wrong and has done wrong. Who's gone to his wives who were sick and said, I want an open marriage, or I'm divorcing you, get out, and I don't want you to take half my money either. Gingrich is the kind of guy who turns in his mind his needs and his desires into what's good for America. And basically, but he does, you can tell, deep underneath, knows that the things that he's done has been wrong. Romney doesn't know the things that he's done are wrong. As long as he goes to church every Sunday, as long as he gives money to his church as long as he stays faithful to his wife. He believes that everything that isn't expressly illegal can be done, no matter how much it hurts another person, no matter how underhanded it is, not may seem, but is. He's willing to do it. And kind of proved it again. The Maine had a caucus. The Republican committee decided that there might be some snow in Maine in February. Maine in February? It snows all the time. People are used to it. Canceled a bunch of caucuses in areas that seemed to lean toward Ron Paul. And what do you know? Mitt Romney wins a caucus by a few hundred votes, 39% to 36%. Gets the headline the next day. So, you know, he's also willing to have all of his friends and Bain Capital, his ex-partners, actually his present partners, because he's making $20 million a year from these people, contribute millions and millions of dollars to his super PAC, and then say, oh, I can't keep my super PAC from running ethically shaky ads against my opponents. There's nothing I can do about it. If they run an ad, you know, 3 times a day, 3 times a minute, it seems like, in some of these places, then so be it. I wash my hands of it. I'm a good guy. If other people aren't and they're for me, there's nothing I can do about it. So it's that separation of doing the right thing from doing something that's only permitted, because super PACs are permitted now, that Romney just doesn't get. And I think that would be dangerous in a president. I mean, what is he capable of? I don't know what he's capable of. So I'll be honest with you, I'd rather have a contest between Obama and Santorum than a contest between Obama and Romney. If Romney won, I just don't know what he's capable of doing. It has nothing to do with his background. It has everything to do with what he's done, and mostly what he's done as one of the bosses, or probably the main boss, of Bain Capital. Basically willing to throw people out of work, to steal people's money legally, to take their pension plans legally, and to put it in the pocket of a company that then feeds him $20 million a year for the rest of his life. And just have no sense of even regret, remorse of any kind. He's incapable of it. So, guy scares me. And I have to admit, of all the Republicans, he scares me the most. Now we get to a couple other things that are going on. First of all, I said in my last show that I'm sure I would be talking about the payroll tax cut. Payroll tax cut just passed today, which is for me, February 17th, just passed the House and the Senate. It is going to Obama's signature. Basically, the Republicans just caved in, just said, let's get it over with. Let's keep it out of the headlines. We have important things like contraception and things like that to broadcast and to scream about. Let's not scream about something as unimportant as these things that are going to support and probably keep the economy and the economic recovery from collapsing. So basically, they reduced the payroll tax from 6.2 to 4.2% for the employee, putting $2,000 a year into the average person's paycheck, $40 to $50 a month, every single year, or $40 to $50 a week, every single week, and making it a little bit easier for these people to live and these people to spend, and spending helps us get out of the get us out of the recession. Meanwhile, since my last show, unemployment has gone down to 8.3%. Almost 250,000 jobs were made last month. If the same thing happens this month, basically the number of jobs that were lost during the first 2 years of the Obama administration, when the economy was in free fall, have all been recovered. What is the other thing? If Obama can get the unemployment rate down to 8.2%, that is the rate that it was at the first month that he was in office. The day he went into office, in other words, the average of the unemployment rate from the previous month, take into account that the economy was in free fall. The LIBOR rate was 4%. It cost 4% for a bank to honor an ATM transaction at another bank. The entire system, financial system, was in collapse. And the unemployment rate went down almost a full percent between January and February of 2009. So January was the last month of Bush's administration. February is the first month of Obama. So basically, all the damage from the recession has been offset, depending on what happens this February, if all goes to plan. So what are the other things that were done in this payroll tax thing? Well, first of all, the doctors got their 28% raise, or didn't get their 28% raise taken away from them. Hooray! The doctors and the hospitals are happy. Medicare has taken care of them. And any Republican that would be against giving money to doctors and hospitals, especially private hospitals, well, I mean, that should have been a no-brainer. The other thing they did, which is surprising to me, is they extended unemployment benefits for another 10 months, although there is a reduction in the long run of maximum benefits from 99 weeks to 72 weeks. 99 weeks is kind of ridiculously long anyway, so that's not really too bad. However, let's offset it by punishing somebody. Let's give somebody a slap on the wrist that to them is not only a slap on the wrist, but something that's going to hurt them forever. And that, of course, is the federal worker, federal employee. I was a federal employee for 33 years. Fortunately for me, I'm already retired. But they're making the people who only a combination, a limited defined benefit, and the rest is all in a what we call the TSP, but it's really a 401k that hasn't gone up in value in 14 years or 12 years since 2000, at least based on a market index that hasn't gone up in 12 years. So they have to literally double the amount that they're putting in for the small defined benefit part of their retirement. So they have to put in an extra 2.3%, basically a 2.3 cut in pay after these people have had no raise for the previous 2 years. Now, take into account that the way the federal retirement works, you get your retirement based on your high 3 salary. So here you have a situation where for 3 years in a row, their salary has been frozen, and their effective salary has gone down by 2.3%, more if you count increases in the federal health benefit. So we had to punish somebody, so let's punish the federal worker. They're a bunch of liberals. Of course, they're not a bunch of liberals. Half of them work for the Defense Department. A lot of them work in Egypt and Kuwait and Doha, which is Qatar, and they're on assignments to Afghanistan, Japan, Germany, you name it. So these people are not liberals in that sense. They're people supporting our war fighters and our defense establishment, as well as the people that make sure your Social Security check gets paid and everything else. National parks, Border Patrol, all that good stuff. are done by federal workers. My name is Reed Silverne. The name of this show is Fed Pride. Reason it's called Fed Pride, because I'm a federal worker, retired, proud of it.